Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Corporate Jet Investor Town Hall. This week, very kindly sponsored by the Air Law Office. And talking about the Air Law Office, let's start with Kerry Dowling. Absolutely delighted to see her. She's ridiculously busy, regretting choosing today for the Town Hall. How has October been for you?
Well, October 1st happened and the floodgates opened. And no, I never regret spending time with you, Al, and with the town hall. Looking forward to Miami next month.
Yeah.
But things are crazy busy. I mean, it's been a busy year, but and Q4 is always busy, but this year, I don't know what happened. It's like everything, the phone started ringing nonstop and everything started going wrong all at one time.
Just in case someone's joining us, having not, who's new to the industry, why is the fourth quarter so important, particularly in the US?
Well, in the US, particularly because, I mean, to boil it down to the base, everybody's trying to do something with their money before the end of the year. So, we are still have tax advantages in place here in the U.S. to purchase a business asset so that you can depreciate and take the costing. So everyone wants to get that money parked before the end of the year so that they can offset other tax obligations for this tax year.
And are you seeing unique challenges this year in trying to get deals closed?
There are. I mean, there's been unique challenges since March of 2020. I mean, I know 2020 is the year we don't talk about, but the unique challenges started, I would say more like June of 2020 when people started figuring out what things were. This year, Q4 has really, I mean, we're only 6 days into it, so that's a little bit of an exaggeration. It was a little bit in Q3 too, but there's no inventory, as you know, as everyone knows, there's no inventory. So it's just worse this year than normal, and transactions that are able to get off the ground and get into the contracting phase, it's harder than it should be. People are getting bogged down in minutia, and honestly, I hate to use this word because it's so cliche, but there are certain sellers out there that are almost using it as a bullying opportunity. Like, I don't want to let you have a PPI and there's no inventory, so take it or leave it.
And would you advise buyers to always have a PPI?
Oh, hell no. Sorry. But absolutely not. I actually have seen both myself and with other colleagues, buyers that have agreed to proceed against industry norms, and it is doing nothing but causing blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot more money for the buyer. Most of the people I'm working with, thankfully, are professionals and won't agree to it anyway. So if a buyer comes in and says you have to buy this aircraft without having inspected it, most people hit the seller's side and the buyer's side are, okay, let's everybody take a deep breath and think about whether this is a thing. Yeah, there's a few shady people out there, but that's not new.
I was talking to a broker yesterday. He was saying that they put an aircraft in for PPI in July, and they've had several COVID outbreaks at the facility. And what had been hoping to be a September close is now looking like maybe a November. So it is difficult, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, July for the PPI, oh my goodness. That gives me heart palpitations just thinking about it. The other thing is, even outside of the PPI, I have a buyer that wanted to change their tail number and we can't get a paint slot. So it's everything. And now I just read an article yesterday about the supply chain challenges and how bad the supply chain is expected to get even worse in Q4. So it's just going to get worse.
Is it PPI and maintenance? Are they the main issues and painting, or are you also struggling to get, there's a limited number of specialist tax attorneys, aren't there, or tax advisors?
So it's interesting that you asked that question, because I just had a powwow with some other people in the industry earlier this week, and we kind of, everybody's having to refer things out because they just don't have the capacity to deal with it. So yeah, there are, on the support side, which I put myself on the support side, tax attorneys, brokers, other tax professionals, and I haven't had the issue with closing agents, but with lawyers and tax and brokers, absolutely, it's definitely become a struggle for everyone. And everyone, most people are, put your head down, ride this wave, enjoy it, because it's probably going to come to a pretty dramatic end. But I mean, there's a lot less sleep these days, put it that way.
It is amazing, isn't it? 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago, everyone was, complaining at lack of deals. And now, I was talking to an operator last week who's going, frankly, we're just exhausted. We're spending our entire time pitching people, adding aircraft to our fleet. We just...
Right. Well, that doesn't even, I mean, that gets, so I represent a number of charter operators, and they're just screaming for pilots right now. I mean, it's been a struggle.
It's also worth noting, isn't it, that once you've closed the deal, to get the true tax benefit, you also have to fly the aircraft.
Right.
For a business purpose.
Right. You have to have at least one business purpose flight before December 11/59/59 on December 31st. And a wink and a nod business flight doesn't necessarily, taking your airplane down to Key West because you want to look at property before New Year's Eve isn't probably going to get you what you need.
Could you argue that your business flight was purely to get the tax depreciation benefit?
It's a unique argument. I suspect you probably wouldn't go very far with that one.
It's probably not a good one to have. What I'm sure you've never had a deal that hasn't closed in time, but I know last year quite a few people had aircraft that were, that deals were killed for various reasons. Do you think let's start a two-part question. If you haven't started now, can you close before the end of the year?
You can. If you have the right team in place, you absolutely can. And if both parties are committed to the transaction, you absolutely can get the deal done. The more complicated it becomes, and I don't want to put any blame on the lenders, because it's not the lender's fault, because it's the borrowers that don't tell the lenders early enough. But especially if you're going to have lending, it's going to be a lot harder, because that adds a couple of weeks to your transaction. But it can be done. I mean, there's still deals out there that can close before the end of the year, as long as people aren't dragging their feet.
And every year at about this time, everyone goes, it's going to be a terrible quarter. And the OEMs always go, I might get Christmas off if I'm lucky. But every year, the industry sort of manages. Do you think it'll be any different this year?
I don't. I think, again, we have unique challenges because of the times we're living in right now. But we've all kind of figured out our footing and where we're, what we need to do to get the deal done. So I don't think there's anything unique this year with regard to the calendar. The unique struggles are on the front end before the contract is signed. That's where I'm seeing most of my unique challenges. Well, let me qualify that. The negotiation of the purchase agreement has been my biggest challenge in the last 2 months, because people are not necessarily being reasonable on what they expect. But once that contract is signed, I think that the brokers and the lenders and the insurance agents and the escrow agents and the lawyers, we all know what we need to do and what we need to do to get to the end. So I really don't think that those challenges are going to cause a problem for getting deals done on time. But then, of course, you have the issue of, is insurance in place? Did we get the insurance in place early enough for the insurance to be in place for the time for closing before December 31st? I mean, as an example.
If you're in a seller's market, are you advising your buyers to not worry too much about the LOI and get a good offer in, and then negotiate the details on the airplane purchase agreement?
So yes, but that's my nature generally, not only in a seller's market. I'm not really a big fan of LOIs. I think we get too bogged down in minutia for LOIs, and we should just go to the purchase agreement. With that being said, it's funny, I'm still kind of stung by a deal last week. We did an LOI because we wanted to get the deposit in place before the purchase agreement so that they knew that we were serious. We changed the LOI acceptance dates from 3 business days to 5 business days because we didn't have a pilot. And they rejected us for that and walked away from the deal. So there are times that the LOI is important, apparently.
I'm surprised anyone even noticed that.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm still a little hot about that.
Are you seeing deposits changing at the moment? Are people asking for bigger deposits?
Absolutely. And I don't know, I mean, when I'm representing the buyer, I always want the deposit to be low, but I don't know that it's necessarily an inappropriate thing right now. I mean, if you're asking for a deposit of $1 million, we need to have a discussion. But going from 25 to 50, I don't. So yes, the numbers are going higher, but I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
Okay, I've got a question from Terry Spruce. What's the shortest period of time in Q4 have you completed a transaction?
Well, I want to lie and be like, oh, it was a week.
3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Without lending, and so I actually do have one. It was probably about 20 days, but the aircraft was already going into inspection, and we just used that as our PPI. So there was no lending. So I've we've been able to do them shorter, and to be perfectly frank with you, you have something, you get an LOI in place on October 15th. It's going to be a challenge to close by the end of the year, but you can do it with the right team. And if you have that serious conversation with your client of, we're going to need to focus on this.
Predicting anything, I think, in the last 2 years has been a complete waste of time, but let's do it. What's your prediction for next year? Is it going to be, are you going to get 3 months off to go to the Caribbean in the first quarter?
That sounds delicious, doesn't it? I don't know. It's a good question. So I think that when you're riding this hot, there has to be, just by the nature of our business, there has to be a down cycle. Unless something dramatic happens and some inventory frees up, people decide to sell what they bought in the last year. I don't know. I'm cynical by nature when it comes to the economy, Al. So I really think that there's going to be a slowdown in 2020, but I don't have any evidence to support that. I just think that 2022 is going to be less.
I can see that. It's hard to see how it can keep going at this rate. It just feels like it can't get much better.
Right.
Or hotter.
Right. And quite frankly, if it does get much hotter, I am going to need a rubber room on the weekends.
Final question. Apart from hiring a good lawyer, what's the key to getting a deal closed at the moment?
So whether you want to call the person a broker or simply a technical advisor, someone that can drive the plane through the inspection and be there for it is going to be your key. I mean, obviously, you have to hire me in order to make it happen, but you have to have a technical person that we can work with to make sure that everything is done on time. Because if you don't have, the inspection facilities are slammed right now too. And if you don't have somebody there, a little gnat in their ear, as my grandfather used to say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
And on that note, encouraging everyone out there to be squeaky wheels. Kerry, Thank you so much, Sonia. We'll let you get back to closing.
All right. Thanks, Al. Thank you, everybody. Have
Thanks
a great
so
day.
Much. That's Kerry Downing from the Air Law office. Thanks, Kerry. We're now going to try and get David Dixon online from Hong Kong. We like to be as global as possible. Shelley Svoren, who is sitting in Napa watching the harvest, has said, please be kind to your lenders. They are federally regulated and need to follow those regulations and internal policies. If you have any questions on how to build better relationships with lenders, please contact me. I'm not planning on being kind to Joe DeLallo when he joins us later from Huntington Bank. Jeff Snowden, who no doubt is as busy as anyone on this call, is saying, I think the overall economy will slow down, but you'll see a rush of activity by first-time buyers that rushed into the industry only to realize that 12 months later they made a rash decision. We are already seeing many clients that closed Q4 2020 but are reselling now. Obviously, that could be strategic, but I've heard people talk about it being more than they thought. David, how are you?
Very well, thank you, despite the late hour.
I know, it's only it's only 11:30 for you.
Oh, yeah, it's sort of middle of my day.
Yeah, I know. You work for I was going to say US broker, but you're not. You're a London headquartered broker.
We are indeed London, but no, we're actually worldwide, please.
Sorry. And congratulations, you opened a Singapore office this week.
We haven't actually opened it yet because of, God forbid, the COVID situation. We should have opened it by now. We've got it established legally. It's just a question of when can we physically move.
Is this just you adding more places in Asia, or is it partly seeing that Southeast Asia is maybe going to be the focus for the next few years more than, say, China?
No, it's far from it. Hong Kong will remain. China remains significant, although it's going through its own issues at the moment. But as a region, Southeast Asia is very active, has been very active, despite all that's going on around now. And my view, will continue to do so. And Singapore has certain features that Hong Kong has. It's a financial center. It has put a lot of money into business aviation at Seletar, as you and many people will be aware. So there's a concentration there of support, capability, financial, but family offices, wealth management, things like that, all of which are part of our process of selling and moving airplanes. So
before we get on to the fourth quarter, David, smart-eyed viewers will notice your book cover is in the back. I Sell Aircraft, No Plane Business, available on Amazon and all major online bookstores. You spent
published by you. Published by
Corporate Investor. I was hiding that. So if there's any typos, it's David's fault. Written by David. What do you think of the new Gulfstream announcements this week? Were you surprised by the two aircraft, the G400 and the G800?
I'm more surprised by the 400. The 800 I thought was a given. I've been around longer than most in this business and was at the very beginning of the G5 and the global programs. And Gulfstream then, back there, I think his name was Bill Lowe at the time, said that it's Gulfstream's mandate to build the biggest and longest range purpose-built corporate airplane. And that's being maintained. They regard as their mandate. And they've always felt that. So not a surprise at all. I thought the 400 was a bit underwhelming, but we'll see.
Interesting. I think the 400 looks like quite a great, looks like a really nice plane. I can see a market for that. You know, it's a less competitive market.
Well, I was just sort of before we came on air, I was sort of writing down, there's a lot of new airplanes. I mean, there's a lot of new heavy metal coming. And the lines between them, and I'm hearing it from various people saying, what is the delta? What am I getting for my extra money? And so the 800 I thought was coming because of that sort of mandate that Gulfstream puts up there as its mantle, as its sort of target in the world. And remember, back in the 90s, Dassault pulled out because they said the market wasn't big enough. And that was just two airplanes. And Bombardier and Gulfstream went to the world with 400 predicted market worldwide. That was the market that they were projecting. And now there's 9 to 12 airplanes in that segment. That's happened in the last 30-something years. So quite significant. Will they all be there? Will all of those airplanes survive? I don't know. Back then, people predicted one of the two would fail then in 1990 something, but they're all there still. And look at it.
Are you expecting Bombardier to, not straight away, but do you think this means the 8500 is coming?
Well, 8,000, 8,500, obviously 8,500 sounds more logical in their sequencing of numbers. Yes, it's there. It's a very easy tweak for them to respond relatively, but it's going to just make the market even more crowded, and who's going to cannibalize who. So interesting to see. I'm not going to put money on any of them failing. It might be a case that they'll all struggle to make it work. But they might not work. It might not be so rewarding financially because I don't know whether the market's grown. There's a lot of new buyers that have emerged because of COVID. Is it enough to sort of push up mid-size aeroplanes into the ultra long range and then absorb all of these? Remains to be seen. These programs are not for 2 or 3 years. These are programs for 10, 15, 20 years. So the answer will be in CJI 31, sorry.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about the launch of the Gulfstream 15. But okay, getting deals done by the end of the year. Are you finding it? Has it got any easier since you were on the first town hall we did back in April last year, which I think was 2020? Has it got easier now?
Well, the tail end of the year is always a rush, as we heard in the previous conversation. You've got the tax benefits, they're still there. So that driver in the US market exists. But you've got other factors where with COVID, there's a new market, a broader market. There's new entrants who are absorbing airplanes. And so there are an extraordinary number of transactions going on, which is going to strain everything. And then you add the rather unfortunate pandemic or COVID situation. I mean, I can give you an example. Just to ferry crew, just to ferry an airplane to a completion center, an inspection center, we had to do a wingtip to wingtip transfer of the crew to avoid a quarantine. And we helicoptered the crew in to land next to an airplane, to walk across the tarmac to avoid quarantine. And then without tests. And then they got on the airplane, and then they flew the thing for the next 6 hours to get it away.
I was going to go, how did you get them to sit on the wingtips?
You know what I mean.
You explained it. You explained it. Do you think, are you seeing people rushing? I think there's a stereotype that Asian buyers tend to be more cautious. And actually, buyers of Asian aircraft tend to slow down deals. Are you seeing a rush at the moment?
I think it's a great. I think you're talking about a situation that existed a few years ago. Now there's a lot more knowledge in the market. The buyers are more aware of the issues and are more responsive. And I think the legal side is educating people better. I think the management is better skilled because everything was small. I mean, it still is small relative to the States, but the experience has grown hugely and the knowledge base has grown. People are on number 2 or 3 airplanes now, so they've been through that cycle. When I started at Jetcraft in 2012, I came here because it was exciting because not many people bought pre-owned airplanes. It was the natural instinct in Asia was to buy new, principally in China or the greater China, Japan, Korea. Now that's changed. So it's got easier in that sense. There are still some idiosyncrasies in the region. There was a conversation, in your conversation earlier about no PPI. I mean, there's still some rather foolish people trying to sell airplanes without a PPI. What are they trying to hide? I mean, that's the immediate reaction I would have. And I would, there's no way that you're going to spend any money on an airplane which you have no idea about it. So I wouldn't be looking to recommend anybody gets into a machine wherever it's from. Doesn't Asia, can be anywhere, that hasn't had a PPI. What I do see, usual classic things, we're running out of hangar space because there's an increase in airplanes. It would be good if the Americans could become more and more comfortable, North American buyer, become more and more comfortable with European service facilities. They're good. Actually, in some respects, they're probably better than the US. and they're there. Whereas again, the infrastructure's come up. So I think we're now seeing, or we're trying to encourage something. Look, we can do this. There is an opportunity. You're going to have to use Europe. You have to be more imaginative to get it done.
Can you get PPI slots at the OEM facilities in Asia?
Yes, you can. They're tight. They're tight, and there are restrictions because we've got, sadly, in this part of the world, rather restrictive environments in various places. Singapore, movement of people. And DAR is getting a DAR around, or the inspector from San Marino, Isle of Man, whoever he might be. In Malaysia, you can't just sort of go backwards and forwards between Malaysia and Singapore, which was sort of traditional way of moving labor and parts and people. All that's completely frozen at the moment, which is why I joked about moving crew from wingtip to wingtip. But parts are a problem because the supply chain is in such a mess. It's a mess whether you want a Santa Claus toy or whether you want a part for an airplane.
Is that partly because there's just not the belly cargo you had before? The airlines were carrying a lot of their aircraft parts around, weren't they?
Well, that's part of it. You certainly can't move parts for our type of business around on ships. So there isn't a container solution. So there are all these things, and then you find, especially with an older aeroplane that may have a Wi-Fi system or a cabin management system that tends to be a bit older, and then you find that we don't make that anymore, and you've got to go and have it made somewhere or customized or something, and you've got to go and find it and get it and move it. It can be a bit tight on some of the older aeroplanes.
What's your prediction for next year?
Desperate shortage of product. But coming back to a point we talk about, there's a lot more new airplanes. I mean, they may not be out till 23. I think the 800 was briefed as being. Can't remember what they said in terms of when, but those airplanes are going to be replacing something. The 700, the 600, the 10 and 8Xs, and Bombardiers. So there's going to be throwing out something, and people got to start thinking about selling those. And they're probably holding back today because they see the feeding frenzy. Well, why sell it today? I can't fly. I don't want to. But then they've got to worry about, well, do I want two airplanes? And if there's an economic dip next year for whatever reason, whether it's interest rates going up or some other factor, some catastrophic event somewhere, we suddenly could find there's a bucket load of airplanes coming back for all sorts of reasons. But there's a lot of new airplanes coming, and the OEMs are going to force those into the people who've ordered them, and that's going to throw out airplanes at the bottom, which is our bread and butter. Yeah,
so you're winning either way. I've got a question for you.
That's you're a journalist. I'm not going to let you get away with that one. No, it's still tough. Whether the market's on the up or down, the supply is still tough.
You've got a question. So before you went to Asia, you started selling aircraft in Africa. Here's a question from Jacob Amerson. Are there any functional MROs based in Africa to service aircraft based in places like Nigeria?
Gosh, in business aviation, I think South Africa, but Nigeria.
ExecuJet had a big facility in.
ExecuJet, I was just about to say they've got something in Nigeria, but no, it's very limited there. You've got Dubai, which when you look at regional support, I mean Singapore. Going to sort of come bring me back here. Singapore was regarded as the support center for Asia, and that was anything from Rangoon to Guam or Beijing to Melbourne. And similarly, Dubai, or bid off center, is a good support base for the northern part of Africa.
Okay, got another question for you, which is Jake, we'll follow up. We should do some more Africa soon. Great question from Jeff Snowden from Aerospace Reports. What is one piece of advice that you would give US companies when dealing with Asian buyers and sellers or service providers?
Be patient. Patience is a virtue.
Virtue is a grace.
I did a deal which took me 8 years. 8 years. And a certain boss I had at the time thought I was nuts. So you'll never sell that bloke aeroplane. You never sell them aeroplanes. Well, I did.
And that was your fastest ever deal, wasn't it?
I've done a bit better than that. I learned a bit. But patience with China is just the nature of the way that market works. Patience is needed. That's completely counterintuitive to the North American way. You want everything now, now, now. Even today, although China's come a long way, it's still China. It hasn't changed. And I think that point gets lost and missed and misunderstood sometimes. Great.
I think that's awesome. One final question. I know you went to see the new Bond film this week. Is it good?
Bloody brilliant.
And that will be on the posters. David Dixon, great. David, thanks so much.
My pleasure, Aston. All the best to you all.
And that's great to see David. We're now going to try and get Joe DeLallo from Huntington Bank. Some of you will know that Joe used to be at, Joe's been lots of, Joe was at BMO. He left to join Huntington Bank. We can miss out the various mergers in the way. There's a great question from, a great comment from Jim Simpson from First Republic Bank saying, as a lender, I would not finance any aircraft purchased without a pre-purchase inspection by a qualified facility. I think that's great. It's like buying a car without being able to open the bonnet, provide the engine in the front. If you buy one without BPI, you should be prepared to push it off the runway. And Jim's also saying, if anyone in the town hall needs information on what an aircraft lender will require for process, please let me know. Please also let Joe DeLallo know. Joe, how are you?
I'm great, Al. How are you, sir?
Very well. Really nice to see you with your plane collection in the background and various swag golf tournament trophies from the National Aircraft Finance Association.
Indeed, indeed.
What are you seeing at the moment, Joe?
We're awfully busy. I would say steady busy throughout the year, and the fourth quarter, of course, is going to be a flurry of activity. But things have been steady. At Huntington, I work alongside Richard Barrett, who I'm sure most folks know, and we've got roughly 20 or so transactions closed year to date. Easily another dozen or 15 plus that will get done in the fourth quarter. And our portfolio continues to grow. We've got over 600 million with over 100 aircraft, and that's growing almost every week.
So you're planning to do almost half your deals in the last quarter. Is that because you and Richard took the summer off?
No, not at all. But I would say certainly the demand always peaks for everyone in the fourth quarter, as everyone knows, and so we'll certainly do 40% plus of our annual activity over the next 3 months.
Do you are you seeing that Shelley's touched on this, you have processes you go through, you can't really rush a bank because you have laws and regulations that you have to stick with. Are you finding pressure to get deals closed fast? Are you being pushed by people knowing it's a seller's market?
I think the experienced owners and buyers understand the market conditions, and the ones that have experienced advisors helping them. I think there's a lot less rush and a lot less panic. As the saying goes, fools rush in. And I think if you're rushing now, I would say now's the time to rush. Now's the time to have a sense of urgency to, if you haven't got an experienced, broker and advisor helping you find the aircraft you want now, good luck. You may not find it before year end. And if you do, you may have to settle, or you may end up, paying top dollar. Whereas if you plan in advance, exercise some patience, not only will you get, better terms, but, most importantly, I think you're going to get the aircraft that you want for the next 5 to 10 years to be flying, and not, rush in to buy something or settle for an aircraft just because your tax advisor told you that you need a tax write-off before year end, so you scramble buy any aircraft that seems suitable.
What's your view on values at the moment, Joe? We've seen, I think I got an email from one of the price guides saying report your transactions this quarter, earlier this week, or for the last quarter. And are you getting the impression that values are rising, or are you still, are you prepared to finance higher loan to values, or has anything changed?
Sure. I guess I wouldn't say there's an impression that the values have increased. I think values in a lot of models have increased, and it's simply driven by supply and demand. We look at things carefully and monitor our portfolio closely, of course, along with the rest of the lenders. And in our view, if you go back 18 months to just pre-COVID, market conditions were pretty solid. When COVID hit, there was concern amongst many in the industry that it was going to be a repeat to 2008, 2009, 2010, when values would plunge and demand would fall off. That wasn't the case. However, as most people saw, certainly in the second and third quarter of last year, values came down quite a bit, and I think what we're seeing now is some stability in the market, some hope that most of the COVID surges domestically and abroad are hopefully behind us. And I think that as certainly the high net worth community has been most active, the corporates we hope will follow suit in 2021, more so than we've seen them do this year. And the value increases that I feel we're seeing in the last 4 or 5 months is really somewhat of a correction of the downfall last year. And if you look at values on a longer basis over time, you'll see that they probably depreciate a little faster than normal during a large chunk of 2020. And now you're seeing somewhat of a correction, not that the market's overheated and people are overpaying for every plane they buy, but it's simply a correction from the softness we saw last year.
You were lending in 2007, not 100, 2007, 2008. You were out, in what was an extremely competitive financing market, wasn't it? Where banks were killing each other for deals. Are you seeing
Indeed.
that now?
I would say that we punch each other a lot. I don't, there's less killing perhaps than in the past, I'd like to think. But it's fiercely competitive. Certainly in the U.S., and which is where we operate, doing business coast to coast. The demand is strong, and the economy is doing well. The equity markets have been strong, so folks, especially in the high net worth space, are looking to replace and add aircraft. A lot of new first time buyers as well, and the banks have a desire to grow. I would say many of them do. It's always a cycle, and certainly Richard and I at Huntington have been doing this for quite a long time, and we've seen the demand cycle up and cycle down. But our bank is positioned with a loan to deposit ratio that's attractive. We are certainly in a growth mode, and we're used to the competition. There's obviously a large handful of very experienced lenders, most of which are probably on this call, and many of which we'll see next week in Vegas and in a month from now in Miami. Those folks are who you want to be working with and for all the advisors on the phone, guiding your buyers and your clients to experienced lenders and experienced attorneys and experienced brokers, et cetera, is what's going to avoid the drama at the end of the year. There's always drama, and there's always a few things that don't go well. And with everything that Carrie and everyone else has spoken about, you got to start earlier than you have in the past. because things are going to come up. But if you've got an experienced lender or an experienced advisor, they're going to help you through those items that inevitably come up, and because they've seen it many times before.
Jim Sims was saying he thinks the industry is experiencing a temporary blip with values up 5 to 10% on previously owned aircraft, especially younger, longer range, for example, G550s with a longer valley. But banks need to be careful on future aircraft values given the blip, which I think you were talking about as well. Joe, Jeff Snowden's saying that he started to see, and he probably sees more transactions than almost anyone else on this call, but he started seeing cases where people who bought last year are selling. Are you seeing that with your customers?
See, the question again, Al, I'm sorry.
First-time buyers last year who've decided to become first-time sellers. Are you seeing any of that?
No, I would say we've not seen much of that. I would say the folks, certainly we don't have any payoffs, this year from folks that bought aircraft last year. I would say it's more the pent up demand of folks that have been, they were hit the pause button, during COVID. Now they've acquired an aircraft, or they're back in the market, and it takes them so long to source an aircraft, to sell it, months later. We're not seeing it much in our space. Not to say it's not happening. I'm sure it is if Jeff says it is.
Terry asked a question to Kerry earlier about what's the quickest deal you've done. And I see Aircraft Finance Corporation is saying they can do one in 10 to 15 business days. I'm not going to ask you for your quickest one, but if I want to get an aircraft financed, let's say I've got one, I've almost agreed the airplane purchase agreement. So it's, I've picked one, I've got a great broker. Have I got time to close a deal with you before the end of the year? Obviously not me, if I was a good credit.
Yeah, we could finish your transaction really quickly with a prompt, no. But no, I would tell you that certainly getting deals done before calendar year end would not be a challenge for our team, and for most experienced lending teams. I would tell you that I think the challenges to get deals done before year end rests more with the aircraft side, getting the inspections completed. I think I saw a comment somewhere in the chain that from Jim Simpson saying that he wouldn't, and nor would he advise lenders to finance a plane that hasn't gone through a thorough pre-buy inspection. I certainly concur, nor would we. But those are the pieces that are gonna throw in curves and challenges for getting deals done before calendar year end. From a lending standpoint, other than the high activity, our process hasn't changed much. It's we've been highly regulated for a long time. If you've got an experienced team that knows how to get deals done, and we've got counsel inside and outside that helps address contract issues, of course we're able to roll with the virtual pre-buy inspections and the inspection reports that come through. But our process hasn't changed that much. We underwrite wealthy individuals and businesses that are flying aircraft, and we can get through that quickly, and certainly long before calendar year end if we were starting now.
Weirdly, would you say one of the big differences between now and maybe at the start of the global financial crisis, or even right at just before the 2007, is most banks like you are pretty defined. So one of the good things is in what you do, and you've got your sweet spots, you've got what works. So you're much better also saying no quickly, aren't you? Or saying we're not the right lender for you.
Absolutely, and I think that again, the common theme, I guess, and some of what I've talking about is aligning with an experienced lender in this case, and an experienced advisory team throughout. because they've been there and they've seen it before, and we learn along the way what works and what doesn't. I think there's less lenders that are trying to be everything to everyone, and I think that's a good thing, because there's plenty of us out there, and I know that if there's a transaction that we look at that we can't get done, whether it's because it's an aircraft or a borrower that's based outside the U.S., or if they need non-recourse for some reason, or they have some other aspect of the deal that just isn't a fit for Huntington. It's the value that I think an experienced lender brings, is that we've got an extensive network of folks out there that we can direct them to, and give them a quick answer that says, you know what, I'm glad you reached out to Joe at Huntington. This one isn't a good fit for us for these reasons. However, here's 2 or 3 banks that will jump all over it, and they appreciate that, because at the end of the day, you want the buyers and the borrowers to have a positive experience in the marketplace. And more times than not, we're able to step up and get those deals done.
Brilliant. Joe, thanks so much. Hope to see you soon.
You as well, sir. I look forward to seeing you in a month. And sorry that Louisa will not be in Vegas next week, and I guess you as well.
Thanks very much. Great to see you. Cheers, Joe. Delighted now to have Mike Dwyer from Guardian Jet. Mike needs no introduction. Mike, selling new aircraft, Gulfstream, founded Guardian Jet, very kindly employed your unemployable brother as well.
Oh, if only he was here.
We'll send you the recording. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you very much, Alistair. Thank you.
So you were, you must have been watching the launch at Gulfstream this week with interest. What are your thoughts?
Kind of mirror what David said, that the 800, and obvious, we all knew it was coming to get the 650 up to the technology of the 5 and 600. The 400, my first impression of the 400 was, I'd never been a huge fan of sort of marketing niche aircraft that sort of derated or deperformed, but I've come around to liking it more and more, and here's why, Al. I just think they've done a wonderful job of consolidating their manufacturing process. The 400 sits above, arguably, we talked about the crowding in the ultra long range market. Well, the super mid-size market, if there's a market that's got a lot of options in it, so they sit right above that with the the 2000 product from Dassault, and it just makes a really neat transition. So yeah, I was very pleased to see it, because again, it's a story, I think, of General Dynamics during the downturn of 2008, COVID, et cetera, and market turmoil, is they just keep plowing investment and technology into Savannah. So go ahead.
Gulfstream's also pretty good at timing the launches. This seems like a really good timing for this one. The market's hot. 650, they got in just before the crash.
Right. Oh, that's a good point.
What are you seeing at the moment? Well, actually, let's stick with the new. Are you seeing you guys have a really strong business advising Fortune 500 companies on what to buy? Are they interested?
Oh, very much so. In fact, we've been very active in kind of that whole product line, and that's really the difference. Sort of the answer to this will bleed into what do I see next year. We knew the story of 2020 was the high net worth individuals rescued us all because they wanted to stay off the airlines, and the corporate in 2020 just went to zero. I mean, ground to a halt, the activity. They've been back with a vengeance all this year, and I think that's what's going to fuel the sustained healthy market of 22. Is for the first time since I can almost remember now, the OEMs have a significant 12+ month backlog almost across the board. So that, and I think David mentioned this too, that's going to bring airplanes for sale into the market and inventory into the market. So I think it's wonderful for us to have healthy OEMs across the board. You know, not that long ago, we were talking about, do we have too many OEMs? And I think that conversation is certainly quelled. And while I do think we're on a spike, in fact, I call it more of a stampede to the exit door in a theater that's on fire and all the dangerous things that happen there. But I do think there's enough demand that we're looking for a healthy 22, just because so much activity can't just, the faucet, we don't think the faucet will just turn off. One of Don's sayings I love is, my crystal ball is good for about 6 months. I get nervous going out 12, but that's kind of what we're seeing into the first couple quarters of 22.
Are you, when you, one of the things you do, which is really cool, is you sit with corporations and you do refleeting plans, which stretch 5-10 years. Are they just, when you did a plan, say you did a plan for someone in 2018, 2015, are you just ignoring 2020 and just moving on? Or, you know, when the aircraft wasn't flying much, or how are you adapting them?
So what you had to ignore in 20 was the travel patterns, because, you know, one of the things we look at is just all the destinations. And so you just had to throw that year out, right? Although it was very interesting to see companies shift how they traveled. There were some companies that changed how they traveled due to COVID. And that, to me, is still the great jump ball of COVID, is, do airplanes end up going deeper into those organizations, or does it just go back to business as usual? I mean, we had some of the oil patch moving roughnecks on, you know, ultra long range equipment, getting them out of countries that weren't safe, or, you know, for various reasons. So yes, the planning or the asset management sort of got disrupted, but that's the whole point of it, is how do you handle disruptions with a fluid, mobile, dynamic plan, as opposed to just making a decision at one point in time and sticking with it for 5 years.
I was going to end on this, but it's going live on the chat. Joan Roberts from IATS is asking, is there a ponytail hidden behind those headphones?
Absolutely, and I'll show it to you in Las Vegas.
I was going to say, just as the scoop of the Corporate Jet Investor Town Hall, this was meant to be unveiled at MPAA. Did you have a ponytail last time the market was this hot?
I've never had a ponytail. So this is...
We've got a really good comment from Joe Zulueta, the ASA from Aeronautical Systems. In the current market, you are literally either selecting from the slim pickings available or getting in line and ordering new from the OEMs and their long lead times. You agree with that completely?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're certainly seeing, and I don't want to generalize because they're always wrong, but if our high net worth folks focused more on, and when I say high net worth, I don't mean the bajillionaires, you know, for the most part, high net worth people bought pre-owned equipment because of the value and the impatience for lead time. We're seeing some of them move, but that's kind of shifting back now, because it was a definite trend when you could buy new for not much more than near new and have a reasonable lead time. Now that you're punching out into, you know, end of 22, 23, that they're back focused on the slim pickings.
In the past, some manufacturers have had a few, they're not whitetails, but they've always made a few speculative aircraft available at the end of the year. Are any of those still available?
I don't see them. No.
Okay. And
zero.
And what's your thoughts on production? Because next year, most of them can't raise production. Textron seem to be pretty confident that they can raise it. And I get the impression that General Dynamics has got some more slack. To be honest, I don't know about the others. What are you thinking on deliveries?
Well, I think, you know, we're all capitalists, so build more, sell more, make more money. But I think the OEMs also have a healthy suspicion of, whoa, do we want to, dramatically retool. I mean, they're very fresh, painful memories from the layoffs of 2020 and even into early 21. Yeah, I think they'll be very cautious. That'd be a great question for an OEM, but I think they'll be very cautious about retooling, and they might just want to sit with big backlogs for a while and enjoy that. It's a wonderful feeling.
You were selling aircraft at the time of massive backlogs. Have they got any tolerance for speculators at the moment? Could I place an order and try and flip it in? Or is now the time to do that if you could?
Oh, I think every OEM has different tolerance for that contractually, and I think we all know who the stiffest is. But yeah, no one wants that in their backlog. And again, the stronger the pure demand, the less that just solves itself. Is that the speculators are allowed in. The OEMs are very sophisticated, and they can see a real buyer from potential speculator. But the speculators, there's more tolerance for that speculation when your backlog's down. So I think that problem solves itself.
Great. So we're not going to see a return to 08 quickly.
Yeah, that one's a little above my pay grade. I'm not sure I could accurately. No, I know enough to say I don't know, but I don't think so because of the conditions we're in.
Okay. Final question from Joe DeLallo. Mike, now that the Cleveland Indians baseball team is the Cleveland Guardians, will the stadium be renamed Guardian Jet Field?
We hope so. We hope so. I was just at a football game in Heinz Field and saw PNC Park across the way and thought, how great would we look up there?
There's a deal to be done. So really cheery. It's really upbeat at the moment. Is there anything worrying you? Is there anything needling away at you at the moment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I talk about that stampede, people get trampled in the stampedes, and we're actually, not to always try to be different, but we don't have a unilateral no PPI. It's always, you want to look at it commonsensically. If it's a 2-year-old 600-hour airplane always maintained by the factory, because two things are happening right now simultaneously. You're running out of airspeed and altitude to get into an inspection facility before the year end. So if you could do it today, you can't do it in 4 to 6 weeks. And there are some people that are pretty good at finances that say, no, I really want the bonus depreciation. So I wouldn't unilaterally, I wouldn't finance an airplane without a PPI. I can't import an airplane without a PPI. But if I wouldn't say that we're anti-PPI but I'd only do it on airplanes where you could really quantify the risk. Remember, no PPI still means you can test fly, bore scope, records review, get your arms around the airplane to limit your exposure. So again, we didn't build our business by being rash and careless with our clients' interests, but that's one of them. One comment I'd make to the conversation I heard, we also think pricing has gone up, and again, on the near new, and it dilutes itself as you get older and less popular, but we've seen it as high as 15 to 20% in this sort of irrational exuberance. So it's going to be a kind of a wild ride to the end of the year, but looking forward to it.
That 15 to 20% can go very quickly, can't it?
Absolutely.
I've got a new aircraft. It's on warranty, and I've got it on tip to toe every program. Do I need a PPI if I'm sticking with the program?
The tip to toe really benefits the seller and his exposure in a PPI. So if you can renew the programs and you get all that signed up, absolutely. Yes, you always need a PPI. I'm not advocating no PPIs. What we're saying is, because by the way, I started to say you're running out of time, but you're also running into harsher sellers who are demanding, no, we're not going to do a PPI. And so you can lose the airplane, and maybe that's a prudent thing to do. But again, if you can contain your exposure and quantify it, then we're more open to the conversation.
Brilliant. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Great speakers from all of you, all great crowd, great chat. And have a fantastic week, everyone, at NBWA base next week. Mike, you're looking forward to it?
Absolutely. Very much so.
Brilliant. Thank